Great. Hi everyone, welcome to Willamette Week's Zone 6 Portland School Board endorsement interview. This next hour or so we're going to attempt to try to get to know all three of you, basically make a choice based on that. We do not guarantee equal time, so if one of you has an answer that we're particularly interested in, we may follow up. That doesn't mean that we like one of you more than the other. And it's not really structured as a debate, but you're more than welcome to, at different points, respond to each other's questions. If we cut you off, it's also nothing personal. We just want to make sure we get through all the conversation topics. So to start, we'd like each of you to do a 2-minute intro, just say your name, day job, what experience you have, if any public service, and why Portland School Board. And we can start with Rob.
Okay. My name is Rob Galanakis. I'm the PTA president at Glencoe Elementary. I'm on my neighborhood association board. I'm a soccer coach, as Steph is as well. And I'm an organizer at Bike Bus PDX. I totally spaced on this stuff. I didn't make sure to cover.
No worries. And then why Portland School Board?
Yeah, why Portland School Board? So I got into this race for creativity, urgency, and bold problem solving at PPS. The problems facing our kids are just getting harder and more expensive to solve. Everyone runs saying the same things. The things they want to fix and how they want to fix them. I'm running a different type of campaign focused on expanding the number of levers we have to pull. Rather than focusing on education policy, my focus is on health, climate, transportation, housing policy, all the things surrounding education policy. I got into school policy from transportation and climate. One of the things you learn in transportation is everything is connected, like how much parking drives the way the design of our cities, and what I found is that PPS did not see themselves really connected to the city. As soon as PPS needed to work with the city, it wasn't there. They weren't interested in it. There was a huge roadblock, and city policy and school policy are really connected. You're seeing this now. I was really happy to see all the school board members in your series of bond articles talk about how this is a bet on the future of Portland and all these things. So I'm happy to see that. But I think we need at least one member of the school board who is not just focused on education policy, but really understands transportation, housing, health, climate, financial policy as well. One of the things that I know we've talked about is the bond, and I've done some extensive write-up of the bond. I brought a copy, though I know you've read it, and this sort of understanding of really wrestling with the trade-offs of what does a $1.8 billion bond mean, or what does it mean in a high-interest environment, low-interest environment, what are the trade-offs here? Someone who can bring that sort of analysis, I think, will be a great addition to round out the board.
Sure. Simone?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Simone Crow. I use she, her pronouns. I do disaster resilience consulting at the national, state, and neighborhood level. I also just graduated from massage therapy school, which is why I'm a little late entering the race. I was busy finishing up school. And I anticipate starting my own massage therapy business in the coming months. I want to be a school board member because I believe that schools are foundational for the success of our society for a number of reasons. Kids are our future, and they are important leaders to invest in, number one. Number two, schools are community sites for collaboration, for ideas, for bringing parents and siblings and teachers and administrators together. A lot of beautiful things can come out of a strong school community, including potentially disaster resilient site, for example. Schools need investments in teachers. We need to pay teachers their worth. They are so instrumental in the success of our students, and investments in curriculum that involves climate and social justice, arts, music, everyday skills, investments in after-school programming, and I would like to see schools be offered opportunities to be disaster resilience hubs, because I think that they're really ripe with their spaces and their resources and their touch points in the community. So I want to be on the school board to make the tough decisions about budgets, because I know it's really tight, but especially as we see federal cuts and the dismantling of the Department of Education, we need to invest in our schools, and we need to be proactive, and we need to fight harder now more than ever to make our schools and our kids' futures bright.
Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Engelsman. I am a parent, I'm a coach, and I'm an advocate. I have spent the last over 20 years in public service as a public defender, at all levels of the trial level. In the last 5.5 years, I have been a public defender dedicated solely to the juvenile justice system, advocating on behalf of juveniles in the juvenile delinquency system and children and their families. I have held 2-day-old NICU babies as my clients, advocating on their behalf wrapped up in the foster care system. I have had to have tough conversations with everyone, from judges to probation officers to district attorneys and assistant attorney generals, advocating on behalf of my clients for them to see what I call the whole pizza instead of the tiny slice of a police report or the tiny slice of what happened in a home that led to DHS involvement. I'm really good at having hard conversations, and I'm really good at sticking with it until people give me the opportunity to talk. And that's something that I would bring to this board, because we are going to have a lot of hard conversations. I am a coach like Rob. We both coach soccer. This is my 8th season, 4th year. I sort of stumbled into it because they were going to cancel second grade soccer if there was no coach. And so I stepped into the role and have learned so much and thrived and enjoyed every second of it. Rain or shine, these kids are, to Simone's point, our future, and they deserve everything that we can give them and everything that they need. And I am a parent. I have 3 kids in Portland Public Elementary School. Rob has heard me say this. I have identical twin girls who, despite sharing an embryo at one point and a bedroom, are going to different middle schools in the fall. So I will be involved in 3 different PPS schools, and we'll be around for a while because my youngest is in 4th grade and we plan on sticking with PPS all the way through. I am running on issues that are important to all of our children, and I want to apply a kid and equity focused lens, and that are the only lenses that I want to apply in every decision that we're making, because I believe if we put our kids first and we make sure that our decisions are equitable for all students, we are going to make decisions that are best for our community. I want to tackle chronic absenteeism. Oregon has a tremendously high rate of chronic absenteeism, which is made worse by some policies and some state laws. As a lawyer, I have written and drafted laws, I have helped pass laws, I have helped amend laws, and I certainly have interpreted and argued laws. I would bring that to the board. There are no other lawyers on the board. I also want to bring art into schools, into every school. I think our funding issue started when someone thought it was a good idea to pull art from elementary school kids, and when we got on that board, everything else has gone downhill from there. Bringing in apprenticeship work and college prep classes, and of course being fiscally responsible in everything we do, including this bond, which I fully support. So that is why I'm running.
For sure. I'd love to hear from the other 2 of you. I know you kind of just listed your priorities, but some of the main priorities that you have going into the school board, and what you feel your role as a board member will be able to contribute to Portland Public Schools. Start Simone.
Sure. Yeah, I have 4 main priorities. Pay teachers their worth. I think that investing in teachers results in strong classrooms, which helps with chronic absenteeism, and even with test scores, it helps with students being engaged and critical thinkers and strong leaders, and it helps lift up BIPOC children when they see BIPOC teachers sticking around. We have a 36% attrition rate in Oregon. It's the top 3 in the country, and it's just not acceptable. So we need to invest in teachers. We need to incorporate climate and social justice and arts and music and everyday skills in the classroom. We need to invest in strong after-school programming to keep kids engaged and community strong and keep kids out of trouble, frankly. We need to consider opportunities to turn schools into disaster resilience hubs. I also care about retrofitting schools so that baseline kids are in comfortable temperatures in the classroom. I think it's despicable that kids are too hot or too cold and there are rats running around the classrooms. So we need comfortable classrooms. I would also like to see earthquake retrofits and solar and battery storage and heat pumps. I would like to see strong equity, diversity, and inclusion policies. I do have a policy background in environmental justice organizing, and I have a strong track record of community engagement and collaborative design when it comes to policy, which I would bring to the school board. And right now and going forward, if I were to be elected, I would be all ears for parents and kids in the classroom if there was an invitation, and for administrators and teachers. It really matters to me what communities want, and so I have a strong set of values based on justice and active listening and inclusion and diversity and equity and climate justice, and really thinking about community members who are most impacted and designing solutions for them. And my approach is that I would really consider myself a vessel. I studied it in grad school, community engagement in grad school. I have many years work experience working with most impacted communities, designing policies and campaigns, and I would really want to make myself available to hear the community's priorities. Just earlier today, I was talking to a parent of a student at McDaniel, and his two concerns are, one, the trauma from COVID, and what are we going to do to have a cultural shift so that teachers are trained in social aspects of teaching, social emotional aspects of teaching, to lift the kids up, not just investing in counselors, although that's important, but really like wrap around culture shift, because kids are really still struggling from being isolated at home after COVID. And that is showing up with chronic absenteeism and kids being checked out on their phones. I think we need to abolish phones in classrooms. I have no problem being really 100% clear about that.
Sorry. I'm just going to go to Rob just for time's sake. But
sure.
If you could outline some of your major priorities, that'd be great.
Three things. I'll start from the general to the more specific. Part of bringing bold and creative solutions is visiting all the schools, or as many schools as I can get to on my bike. I'm sorry, some of them in Southwest are really, really far away. And seeing what problems they're having that are fixable. Everyone is going to talk about class sizes, attendance, school start times. There's some things that are we can't fix with our budget crisis, right? It's much easier to solve problems with money than it is without money. We don't have money. The legislature is not going to fully fund what we need. Only 18% of Portland households have school-age children at home. It's probably only around 15% of households that have kids in PPS. So when you're a legislator figuring out what to appropriate from the general fund, which can be used on absolutely everything, schools are important, but our school funding is average, somewhere around average, and our performance is somewhere way below average. So I would love our legislators to give us more money, to appropriate more money for schools. I don't blame them for not doing it, because that money is not going as far as it should be going. So I have larger views around how the state of our civic society and schools, which I'm not going to answer as part of this question because it'll go on way too long. But the small incremental improvements that I want to focus on really start with visiting schools, talking to parents, and say, what are the problems you guys are having, and what are the solutions for very low cost that we can implement. I was at Grout with Stephanie in March, and they were talking about this low-income housing, that they were having problems getting students to school, and they were like, we used to have a walking bus, but it worked really well, but the staff member who was running it wasn't able to do it. Well, doing bike buses at 20 elementaries or K through 8s, and one of them is at Grout, and I'm working with them on how do we establish a walking bus with Oregon Walks, who they were already working with. Wasn't all me here, but these types of like very contextual solutions. I'll skip right to the third one, is a very specific thing. So I mentioned I got into this through transportation advocacy. I organize with bike buses, bike transportation in particular, because of its climate and land use impacts that are really important to me. So as a specific thing, I will work extremely hard to establish a true safe routes to school network. This is one of these things where the city is pointing at the schools and schools are pointing at the city. No one wants to do anything, but having kids walking back to school is not just about getting around, it's about giving kids options to not sit on a bus for 45 minutes on their way to and from school. It's about giving kids more exercise, which we know improves results. It's about reducing congestion. It's about increasing safety. It's about building healthier communities. It's about housing policy. It's even about stuff like school boundary resetting, where there's a lot of entitlement. I understand where the entitlement comes from, but there are legitimate concerns where, like, this used to be a half a mile walk to school, and now I have to go 1.5 miles and cross Powell and Holgate. That's a very different experience. But if we had safe routes to schools, we would have different types of conversations around boundary resetting. So that would be a very specific thing that I would judge my success or failure as a board member. Maybe you could hold me to that in 4 years, the progress we've made on that.
Okay. Yeah, I actually wanted to expand on something Rob said and pose the question to two of you. So there's been obviously this very big debate in the legislature about increased funding for schools versus some people who say, well, Oregon spends kind of roughly in the middle of the pack, and its outcomes are pretty much at the bottom line. I know PPS is a little higher than that, but it's nothing to really brag about. I'm kind of curious where you all strike the balance between more funding versus use the funding that we have more efficiently, how you kind of reconcile with that debate. We can start with Stephanie and then.
Sure, thank you. That's a great question, and it's one of the questions that the board is facing currently, has been facing for years, and will be facing over the next 4 years. I think it is a combination of both. The legislature is currently working on a bill that will hopefully fix some of the strangling of special ed, for example, where we have a higher enrollment requiring and needing special ed assistance and capped at 11% funding. So PPS and other schools are having to cover some of the funding requirements because there's a gap. If the special ed legislation moves through and the cap is raised, there would be additional funding coming in that would be alleviating some of the financial issues that PPS has to pick up, because every kid needs to get what they need in the school walls, and I'm grateful that PPS is making sure that they are trying to fill those gaps. So that would alleviate some of the issues. Oregon has a quality education model, and for us to have, and this is not something that is national, it is something that Oregon created in, I believe, the 90s, don't quote me on that, but it was something that we set up ourselves, only to then never fund it properly, never to follow it. And so the QEM comes in, and there are issues with the QEM and how it's set up and whether it needs to be revamped and brought up to speed, but it is still there, and we act like the QEM is what we need to follow, but then we never fund exactly what QEM says. So we're already starting off behind the gate, because if the quality education model says we need this in order to have a quality education, and the legislature gives us this, there's another gap. So having that conversation and overhauling the QEM, having people fund that properly, great. And then we start looking at the current funding that we have, and is it being applied properly? I have looked at budgets. I have read hundreds and sometimes thousands of documents through my work, and they're not always exciting. They're often very dry, and I get through all of them and I understand them, and I ask questions of experts, and I would reach out to those who are better educated and better understand everything so that I am fully prepared. And so I would look at whether we have a top-heavy administration within PPS. I am very grateful for Dr. Armstrong's work so far. She appears to have come in with kids in the school, a history living in Portland, and is on the ground in ways that I did not expect a superintendent would be. I'm so impressed with how present she is, and that gives me hope for functioning all the way down, sort of a trickle-down effect. But I would like to look at partnerships, because I think there are communities out there that are already doing some of the work, and certainly for my public defense clients, the juveniles, both in the foster care system and the juvenile delinquency system, they are working with wraparound services that are getting funding from elsewhere and already are working with those clients. So we bring in things like Friends of Children, which has a tremendous reputation for doing outstanding work with kids from kindergarten through 12th grade, and we have them on board as much as possible to shepherd our kids through PPS, no cost to PPS. We work with organizations like SCI and Black Parent Initiative and Latino Network for some of the wraparound services that they're already doing, and we have them come into schools, no cost. And then I would ask questions to TriMet, for example. Why do you I just was chaperoning a field trip for my 4th grader 2 days ago. And I learned that each child costs $1 to the school to get on the TriMet, to go to Path Home nonprofit, to do some community service work there. And so I wonder, why is PPS having to charge? And so I would have that conversation with TriMet and see if we can work a partnership and extend that partnership to all PPS students, so they have a ride card. So these kinds of partnerships would mean that we can have additional assistance coming in without having to raise funds. But I am not in the camp that the legislature does not have to give us more money. I believe that even if we don't have children in schools, having kids in a great education system benefits all of us. It benefits everyone who doesn't have children, because our electorate in the future is educated. Our future doctors, our future grocery store workers, our future teachers have grown up in a system that has community first and has put our children first.
Great. Simone, I want to get to you in 1 second. I saw you kind of smirk during the QEM comments, or not smirk, but like kind of laugh a little bit. I mean, what's your take on that?
Because I agree.
Yeah,
It's just so silly.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Simone.
Yeah, I also believe in the both and approach, that we need more state funding, especially in light of cuts at the federal level. We also need to be more efficient with what we currently have, because we might not get more state funding. And even if we do get more state funding, it probably won't be enough to do the sorts of things that I would like to see. I have a background in policy advocacy and relationships with lawmakers, and I'm not afraid to advocate for more funding at the state level. I think that we need creative ideas within the school board and school communities. We need to think strategically and together about smart ways to cut where we can, where it's not going to have a huge impact. And that involves having leaders who really know how to listen and collaborate and make hard decisions when we need to. I do question the idea of expanding physical buildings when we are in such a dire budget situation. I think that that could be a potential area where we reconsider reconsider spending. I would have to do deeper dive on the budget to come up with other areas. This wouldn't help the school board, the school district budget, but it would help families. I think that all kids in PPS should have free public transportation on TriMet. And I think that school board members should think about the budget, number one, absolutely, but we should also be considering community members' whole lives and housing and transportation and all the ways it intersects with the school board, or with the school district and with the budget.
I know you mentioned like being more efficient with the dollars we currently have. I mean, just as where is your brain going when you say more efficient? I mean, what are some examples maybe that you would consider?
Well, the one that I mentioned that comes to mind is not expanding on building more buildings. Can we instead retrofit what we currently have? Can we think creatively about different types of classrooms to accommodate students? That, can we punt building out down the road when we have more funds for that?
Yeah, I want to kind of bridge into, that's a good way to segue into the Portland Public Schools bond. I'm first curious to hear from each of you how you've kind of thought about the whole bond process, watching it kind of go through the board, what you've made of it, and start with, one or two things that you maybe would have done differently if you were on the board with this bond process. And we could start with Rob.
I'd love to not start because I've written so much about it. I'd really love to hear what Steph and Simone would say without starting with all the stuff I've already written. Is that all right?
Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Out of the gate, I support this bond for a number of different reasons. We all know that Oregon has a history of being not only not friendly, but downright cruel and forcing out our Black and brown community members, dating from when Oregon became a statehood. Our history is shocking, and our kids get to learn about this because we have a school board and a governor and a legislature that allows for BIPOC and Black history to be taught in schools, because it is American history. If we send a message 80% through, having started with some of the schools that serve the more affluent, and we don't finish with Jeff or Cleveland or Ida B. Wells, what message do we send? I believe, having stepped in Jefferson many times, because a lot of my clients, all of whom face oppression and have been targeted by Portland police and the systems, they go there. And if we send that message to them that you don't get a modernized school, but Grant and Benson and Lincoln do, I don't want to be responsible for the message that we are sending to kids that are already feeling the burdens of the color of their skin, meaning that they get a different treatment in our society. So, does that mean that I am just going to rubber stamp anything with the bond? Absolutely not. I'm very grateful that the school board currently is tackling big issues with can we lower the bill? Can we create an equitable school out of Cleveland and out of Ida B. Wells that is similar to what we've built already or what we've created in Franklin and McDaniels, which is extraordinary, without the high costs? So they're working really hard, and I would continue that role as we go along to make sure that we aren't wasting money. But schools like Jefferson have issues within them that other schools don't, and so we can't just cut the Center for Black Excellence, for example. I was understanding that the board has been dealing with the Center for Native American Students and how they fund that and whether they should fund that. And I was very grateful that Dr. Armstrong had an idea of how to make sure that those students get what they need without cutting it entirely. But Jefferson and Cleveland and Ida, and I sort of am doing this because it's geographical in my mind, they deserve to have schools that they are proud of, that are modernized, that are not falling apart. I've been inside Cleveland as well because I volunteer judge the Constitution team there, and it is rabbit-warreny and confusing and old, and parts of the walls are falling down, and we can't expect students to go there. Those are my thoughts for, I can't remember the original question, except that I support it and I would want to look fiscally responsibly at it, but I am not comfortable with saying we don't need to do it. I will also say, two last points, the populations, the enrolled populations at Jefferson and I think Ida are higher than they're supposed to be. And so they're not struggling with population issues or enrollment issues. And I will also point out that in looking at PPS's own enrollment stats compared to the PSU statistics of what we should forecast, each time that a forecast has come in, that has had a ripple effect through the schools because they have cut things expecting less students to come in. And the 9th grade September rolls around and more students come, and this has been consistent 2022, 2023, 2024, and again this year. Which I guess was 2024, in talking with some of the principals, they had to shuffle, which was damaging to the students who were coming in. They had to sort of shuffle and move classes around. And so I agree with Vice Chair DePass that if we build the schools, they will come, but I also firmly believe that we cannot stop at 80% and we need to finish the job.
I kind of want to ask a quick follow-up just about the trade-off. So I know that you said, it's not fair to this group of students if we don't build their school, and I sympathize with that. But I wonder, I've talked to a number of education experts who say, well, if the school district is going to be funding 9 builds and 9 fully operational high schools, in 10 years, like if there is an enrollment, what does that mean for that school? Does it mean, spreading those operating budgets thinly throughout the district so that every school has, a half-time band teacher instead of a full-time band teacher, or, like less science teachers or like less STEM programming or what have you? Like, what do you make of that trade-off? Is that something that feels worth it to you?
I frankly don't see it as a trade-off. I see it as, instead of forecasting through a smaller lens, I don't agree that we can look at the next 5 years or 10 years and say that this is what's going to happen. Portland is, especially under this federal administration, Portland is a hub. People are moving here. During COVID and before that, our population was exploding, was booming. Our economy was growing really well. I believe that Portland is a wonderful place to live. I love it, and I think that everybody is going to keep coming. And so I do not agree with the forecasting that we're going to have decreased enrollment. I believe firmly that people are going to keep coming here and they're going to keep sending their kids to public schools. I think Portland has one of the highest enrollment rates of public schools of kids in the neighborhoods. We also have a lot of great private schools, but we have a very high enrollment rate, and so we should expect that people will keep sending their kids to these public schools. And if we build them, and offer the classes that people want, kids are going to go there. They're going to feel proud about going to Portland Public Schools. They're going to feel proud about showing up at whichever of the high schools they go to, and they're going to feel equitably treated and excited to be there.
Can I ask where you got the information that Portland has a high public school share split? Because I found different information, but
I was just talking to some of the community members who were looking at.
I'm really curious. We can connect afterwards.
Yeah.
The information I found was the total opposite.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I support the bond. I think it's the boost that we need. I think that we need careful, critical eyes on that spending so that we can be equitable and efficient and impactful. I think that those 3 criteria should be the lens that we carry as we implement it. I agree that classrooms deserve to be safe and engaging and beautiful places where kids are proud to be. I just think we need to really question. I am an environmental justice organizer, and I still question, does every school need to be LEED certified? I'm not sure. Does every school need to have every brand new shiny thing? I'm not sure. Where can we, like I said, be efficient while being impactful and prioritize the things that matter to kids and teachers? And I think the bond will help us get there. We just need to be careful with it.
So this bond is not the bond I would have put forward. It's not the bond anyone on the school board would have put forward if they could. Having talked to almost all of them about it, all of them don't like something different about the bond. Ultimately, I was a no on the bond because I did not feel there was sufficient information for the public to authorize such a large bond. And what this actually means in practice is each student in PPS has $60,000 of outstanding debt. This doubles the amount of outstanding debt per pupil from $30,000 to $60,000. We went 17 years with no capital bond, deferred maintenance piling up. It also meant when we passed our bond in the early 2010s, we didn't have any debt we were carrying around. So we could pass a bond, we could pass a bond, we could pass a bond, we could pass a bond. When you hear the bond campaign, the Yes campaign, talk about bond cycles, there's no such thing as a bond cycle. A bond is an authorization for the school district to sell bonds to people that will buy them and make use of that money that they then need to pay back over a long amount of time. We've been talking about a 4-year bond cycle. There's no such thing. What we actually had was enough capacity in our property tax rates, Measure 5 and 50 rates, to keep offering bonds, to keep giving bonds to voters and keep passing them. We're now at a point where they're talking about an 8-year bond cycle. We're not in an 8-year bond cycle. We have so much debt on our books that we cannot make another bond authorization. It's not worth bringing another bond authorization to voters for 8 years, because after 8 years, enough bonds will have matured where we can ask for, at most, probably another $600 million. And if we do that, we basically have the amount we can offer without raising taxes every 8 years. At some point, we need a plan to say we can't keep going to voters with bonds. Matthew Prophet had one bond. He was our best superintendent. Everyone loves Matthew Prophet. He was awesome. I've heard so many amazing stories. He asked for one bond. Well, part of that is like maybe he should ask for 2 and we wouldn't have so much ongoing maintenance. But we do need a plan to not have bonds. So some of the serious concerns I have is like we are funding technology upgrades. This is a 32-year authorization. So we can raise a $1.83 billion in principal over 32 years. We have technology upgrades that have an 8-year life cycle. This is like a 50-year municipal bond for a bridge that you're going to have to replace in 8 years. If we continue to do this, we will be paying twice as much for technology updates because we will have to be paying interest on something that should be coming out of general revenue. Unfortunately, and this is how I got to a yes, we don't have a better option. We need to fund technology upgrades, which are not good for capital bonds. they're not appropriate for capital bonds. We don't have an option. What are we going to cut a bunch of teachers because we want to upgrade our Chromebooks? Of course not. We're going to kick the can down the road. That's all right. Let's kick this can down the road. So the bond is filled with this type of stuff. Unfortunately, with what has been going on with inflation and tariffs, this bond, the high school modernizations are going to come in way overpriced. We need to prepare for $400 to $500 million for high schools. There is not room to cut. Simone mentioned cutting some of the space. I don't know if you followed the just in the last few days, it came back, 20,000 square feet reduction. It's like $17 million. There are not levers to pull to get these costs down. Ultimately, the real big thing that got me to yes is all this talk about investment in Portland's future. Steph brought up the enrollment projections. In my article, I mentioned the 2008 PSU Population Research Center projections nail our 2021 enrollment, to a T. So you're wow, these people are so prescient. How do they figure this out? Well, go to the 2016 enrollment projections, which are just 5 years away from 2021, and they're off by 10,000. So the population projections are not destiny. They're not even close to destiny. So this bond is an investment in Portland's future. It's going to be expensive, but the reason I brought this up now is the reason these high schools are expensive is because Portland believes in urban high schools. We look at what Beaverton did and we're why are high schools so much more expensive than Beaverton? Well, because no one wants to build. Look at Cleveland. If you're the architect PPS goes to talk to Cleveland, you're this is insane, guys. This is, you're asking us to do what? This is crazy. This is not a suitable site for a modern American high school. And Portland wants to do it. I think it's awesome. I think our kids should be able to go to an appropriately sized high school that's in their neighborhood and they're proud of it, and we can have community events, use it as disaster resilience hubs. But this is expensive. You can't do that for $300 million. You're going to be doing that for $500 million. And let's lean into that as a campaign, as a city. Let's lean into this is a thing this is an investment in Portland's future. This stuff's expensive, but it's what we want to do. And the alternative is not cutting another 20,000 square feet or cutting the band room. The alternative is just to what's the alternative? to appropriate a bunch of land in Clackamas and have our students get on a bus going there. This is it. Now we do need to do. I think we've lost taxpayer confidence. There's a whole bunch of stuff we need to improve. But in terms of thinking about the bond, I'm a yes. I wouldn't blame anyone who votes no. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if it fails and we come back to voters with a different bond next time. I think the bond is if you look at the parameters when they were designing the bond, it was we need to do another bond in 8 years. We need to raise enough money to modernize the schools, and we don't want to raise taxes. What's the maximum amount of money we can get? Turns out it's about $1.8 billion.
Okay, let's do a lightning round. What's the endorsement you've received you're most proud of?
Mitch Green.
Okay.
I just entered the race because I was finishing school, so I'm working on endorsements.
Okay.
Mine is Jane Corey. She is a former retired Belmont librarian and also a neighbor who's known me for 10 years, and I'm really proud that she endorsed me.
Great. What current school board member do you think most highly of?
I have sat down with almost all of them. I really like Eddie. I really like Eddie Wong.
I really like Michelle DePass. She's a friend and a community leader and a collaborator, a colleague. I've worked with her on disaster resilience projects and think that she has strong values.
I got to agree with Eddie. He sat down with me for many, many hours in person and over email discussing the bond. And he's awesome. And I have loved watching him in chair of the school board as well.
How much have you raised for this campaign?
Between 4,000 and 5,000.
300.
I'm a little over 8,000.
Any lightning round questions?
I don't have any lightning round
Then
questions.
continue with the long form.
That was
please.
exciting.
Okay,
So
so
we break up the rhythm a little.
yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I wanted to kind of build a little bit on last bond thing, hopefully. So, we've talked to a number of people now who said, this is a very optimistic building strategy for Portland Public Schools to be kind of at it alone. And you've kind of cited, maybe in this current federal time, Portland will become a more magnet place for families or what have you. But I'm just curious what inspires confidence, that people are going to flock to Portland. And in the case that, enrollment really does decline in this way, I mean, what is your strategy for that? Say in 3 or 4 years, enrollment looks really shoddy for the district. I mean, how will you handle that as a board member?
Well, I guess it depends on whether we're talking enrollment in high schools and middle schools, K-8s, or elementary schools, because each of those is going to bring a separate response. I would look to, hopefully Dr. Armstrong is still around. Hopefully she has continued to do what we've seen out of her for the last, since she began, which is investing in the community and being part of the community. So I would look to her to come up with strategies and ideas and to bring them to the board, and I would ask tough questions. In my work as a public defender, I have learned that when people feel heard, even if they don't get the outcome that they want, they often feel like the system works. They trust the system better. And so we don't do that as board members from 10,000 feet and just communicating with Dr. Armstrong or just reading some materials and then talking about it in a public meeting for 2-3 hours. We do that as board members by, like Rob said, getting into schools. And my intent is to get into every single school within the first 6 months and not just talk to their administration, but try to talk to everybody, teachers, kids. Kids love to talk. They have tremendously great ideas. Talking with all of the community members that are involved in our schools and hearing from problems and hearing ideas from them. Having listening sessions like our city council is doing, which is tremendous, and so they can bring ideas and people feel heard. And that way, I believe, I will hear when issues start to bubble. I will have ideas that are brought that are probably well outside of my scope of thinking, and people are bringing great ideas to me. And then I would bring those ideas to the board, bring them to Dr. Armstrong, bring them to all of the partners, and try to figure out what we do with declining enrollment. It's not in our students' best interest if we cut AP or IB classes from high schools, if we close a neighborhood school at the elementary level and kids have to, like Rob said, cross Powell or cross Holgate to get where they need to go. That's not in their best interest. But it's also not in their best interest if they have classroom sizes of upwards of 36. Rob's kids are at Glencoe, my kids are at Abernathy. We have the highest 2 elementary class sizes on the PPS list, and the kids feel it and the teachers feel it. So I would be looking for community involvement with strategizing and talking with Dr. Armstrong, talking with the partners, talking with the teachers to see what the best decisions would be.
Same question?
Yeah.
I would need to see the projections myself, but if in the event that they are lower than anticipated, I agree it would start with community listening to kids and parents and teachers and administrative staff, including Dr. Armstrong. And I wouldn't be opposed to making tough decisions. I don't want a child to have to travel far to another school, but if the community agrees that that outcome of closing a school or combining a school, if it's not serving a purpose, then why have it, basically, would be my question. So I would just want to look at also other potential innovative solutions I haven't thought of that could make things more efficient. I don't want it to come at the expense of classroom sizes or of cutting important music or arts or other types of education, but we would have to adjust to the reality.
So when we talk about the bond, one of the reasons I came around on is when we're investing, you have to think about upside versus downside. And the upside of the bond is, well, this is a huge bet on Portland's future. The downside of the bond is that if our enrollment projections, if the current pessimistic projections play out, no one's going to care about an extra $600 million in this bond. The structural tax problems that Portland faces, incredibly high downtown occupancy causing lower property tax revenues, an increasing
Really high vacancy.
vacancy. Sorry, what? Oh, occupancy. Yes, vacancy.
I don't think that's true.
Incredibly high vacancy. Structural problems with our police and fire pensions that are paid out of the general property tax that we raise will increase. The only way to get that down is to increase the number of people paying taxes. The amount is fixed, so if we can increase the number of people, we'll be paying less of a percent of that.
You're talking about my favorite subject, compression.
I know. I spent hours. Someone asked me a question and I couldn't answer it, and now I'm like one of the people that can talk about Measure 5 and 50 compression and caps, and I feel really happy about that.
I was assigned a cover story on libraries in 2021 and had to learn compression on the fly.
It's
And
incredible.
now it's all I can talk about.
It's incredible. We're in a club, and all you have to do is like dig through bizarre. It's really weird, and I still get some of the terms wrong. If the downside of not taking a bet, of not taking this bond as a bet, is basically locks in that pessimistic projection. And the downside there is the $100 million our city budget is short right now will look like. Oh, do you remember the Halcyon days where we only had to cut all of our community programming and some program, like, oh, Portland was so good in 2025 when this was the only stuff we had to cut. We're really looking at, we've talked about boom loops and doom loops. We're looking at like borderline existential, not existential because, Portland can come back around in 50 years like Detroit is, but we're looking at really significant generation defining trends that we in this room are going to have a say in figuring out. And the downside of not doing this bond is so enormous that I gotta take that bet. I gotta take that optimistic bet, because the problems are gonna be so big, no one's gonna be like, oh, PPS passed too big a bond, and that's not gonna be why Portland's tanked. It's gonna be one, like, just throw it on the heap. No one's gonna really care.
For sure. I have one individual question for each of you, and then hopefully we'll be able to wrap it up after that.
I'm sorry, I gotta point out that's an intriguingly apocalyptic argument for passing.
We gotta make it work.
Like, if it doesn't work, we got bigger problems. I actually find that to be the most persuasive argument I've heard so far.
It was for me.
I'm going to start with Stephanie. So I know that you have the endorsement of the Portland Association of Teachers. I would like to hear one or two places where you feel that you're independent from the union's values.
That union or all of the
That
union?
union.
That union's values. I would say,
Or policy.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Not values is not the right word.
You need to show an
Yeah.
independence in their values, right? Like,
Yeah.
is there a place where you can demonstrate independence with something they want?
so when I entered this race, like I mentioned, my kids' class sizes are giant at Abernathy. They're too big. And so I entered this race as class size being one of my big issues that I wanted to campaign on. I am very good at talking to people and getting more information and being persuaded or mind changed or educated on an issue. I don't put up walls. I'm very open to being persuaded. Do I think it would be ideal if all of the classes were at 2021 like they were right after COVID when all of the federal COVID money was coming in? Absolutely. But do I think that we can cut class sizes without affecting classrooms at other schools that need them to be smaller? It was at Grout, like Rob said, and the class sizes are smaller there. They're a Title I school, but they have reasons for them being smaller. So I've been talking to people about how we can bring other resources in to assist in a giant class. And both my kids this year have a student teacher and last year had a student teacher, and having that extra person in there, kind of a practicum experience, learning on the go, learning from wonderfully experienced teachers who have just dedicated everything to this kids, bringing in reading results at Abernathy, and most recently we've brought in a new math program, which my fourth grader, who's really struggling post-COVID, is taking advantage of and loving, and it's helping. Bringing in those kinds of programs that can help individual kids, bring them out of the classroom during non-instructional time so that they can get a little boost. It takes the pressure off that classroom teacher from having to have that student that time. And so I've come around to realize there are bigger issues that are important to me. The chronic absenteeism has always been important because of my work with juveniles who are just gone post-COVID. But I've come around to realize that as a community, we can partner and we can bring resources into the classroom, and it will be good for those teachers. And so I think I probably differ there a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Simone, I'm curious, so I know these two have been kind of long-standing in the race for a little longer than you. I just would like to hear, from your vantage point, what makes you the candidate to pick over both these people, whether it's, differences that you guys might have, or, just learn a little bit more about your spot in this race.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's fair to say I'm the underdog. I joined the race late because I was finishing school and wanted to be really thoughtful on whether or not I joined. And when I decided to join, it was really because I care about the future of our kids and because I care about the broader community, and I think schools really impact the broader community. I think I bring a fresh perspective. I think sometimes the best, most helpful perspective can be a newer perspective that has fresh ideas and new ways of looking at things. I have really strong values of justice and equity and inclusion and active listening and community engagement, and I have a strong track record and the trust of many years worth of colleagues and the community who believe in me and have seen my work speak for itself. And I'm a really hard worker. This is not an easy job. It's unpaid, 10 plus hours a week. I know what I'm getting into, and I think I'm the right candidate because I have strong values, like I said. I have good ideas. I want to pay teachers their worth first and foremost. I want to invest in curriculum. I want to design for the acceleration of individual students. So if a student is not doing well, I want that student to get better. They don't need to be at the same success rate as the top student in the class. I just want all students to do better. I believe in and have a record of community listening and collaborative design. And at the end of the day, I am a vessel with strong values that I really believe resonate with a lot of Portlanders.
Certainly. Rob, I'm curious, so your platform centers around a lot of things that maybe don't necessarily at first glance have to do with schools or with educational policy. In some ways, transportation or housing or whatever, it feels like a bigger role for city council or some other governing commission. So why school board, and why is school the place to make that change?
Oh, such a good question. Because PPS, one of the largest property holders in the city, the largest car trip demand generator in the city, about 30% of all morning trips are school runs. It is an extremely large employer. It's connected to, it's located everywhere, right? It's not even just like OHSU up on a hill or Nike and what. It's everywhere. So we've talked about declining enrollment and stuff like this. What does housing policy have to do with, when in the Willamette Week comments, when Steph and I were there, it was like, PBS shouldn't touch housing policy. What does housing policy have to do with PBS? Well, everything. Our declining enrollment is a direct result of the housing policy Portland's had. And PPS needs to be out in front advocating with groups like Portland Neighbors Welcome for a plan like Inner East Side for All, which will provide a much more liberal zoning policy throughout the Inner East Side. Because we know how much schools impact who can live where, and home values, and then redistricting and stuff like this, or rebalancing. These are conversations PBS needs to not be reactive to. It needs to be a partner with. Michelle DePass told me last week that Sam Adams' administration used to have a liaison with PBS. we haven't had that position since. I know firsthand, it's like if anyone has a field that Portland Parks and Rec has to use, there's arguments about like who mows this scratch of grass and who mows this scratch of grass. We have one city, but it's connected it's treated as two very different groups. PBS is too large of a partner to not have someone who is looking at both. And it's awesome to have someone like Councilor Quayamaline on City Council, who's a former teacher and understands how the schools work. I think we need someone on City Council to look at how the city's working and look for how, what is safe. I talked about safe routes already, but like housing policy, climate policy. In fact, there's even a thing in the PBS's climate crisis response plan. They spend all this effort developing and actually leave out home to school transportation as part of the things they measure, and which is about, ran the numbers on it, it's about equal to their entire rest of their transportation carbon emissions, which is about 10% of their total carbon emissions. And their explicit reasoning is, well, we don't want to take credit for like outside trends. That if the city is able to totally change the way kids get to school, we don't want to take credit for that in our like measurements. And I'm like, guys, who do you think is the main cultural contributor of how kids and families are getting around the city? For PBS to totally push that responsibility out and say like, that's not actually a thing that we should measure, the city should take care of that, it totally misses the boat. And of course now the city can't actually make the progress it wants, and the school can't make the progress it wants. So I think it's the lack of looking more broadly. Like, we're leaving a lot of possibilities on the table, levers we can pull that will make incremental improvements to proficiency and attendance and graduation and all sorts of educational results. But a lot of it is working more effectively as a city, because we're going to sink or swim together. There's no future where like PPS does poorly and Portland does great, or Portland does poorly and everyone's like, oh, PPS really turned everything around. So we need people looking both ways.
Do you have any more questions?
I do not.
Okay, we have a fun question that we developed.
I don't know what the fun question is this year. I'm so excited.
So we would like to hear from all three of you what your favorite childhood snack was.
I you want me to start? I can start. I'm a child of the 90s, and I grew up in Maine, and it wasn't potatoes, even though we have lots of those in Maine. We weren't allowed a ton of sugar in my house, so my favorite childhood snack was my friend Hillary's Gushers that she would trade for me.
Just waiting for someone to say Gushers.
Yeah, I love Gushers. They're very 90s. They still exist, though.
We never really had snack food or desserts growing up, but we did have the ice cream truck come around and the WWF bars. Okay, so here's the thing. There's an ice cream shop over on like Inner East Side, like Grand over there. It's like a wholesaler for the ice cream trucks, and the ice cream trucks roll in, but they also have a counter. And I got into like a 20-minute discussion. Yeah, I got into like a 20-minute discussion. So I went in there once with some work people, and I was talking with the guy, and I was like, oh, you know the WWF bars? And we had like a 20-minute nerd out. And apparently they were like, there's like a special die casting for them, and it was extremely expensive to make those like chocolate castings of the wrestlers on the WWF bars. But they still have a very vivid association for them.
So I did not grow up in this country. I naturalized in 2017, which you may have read on my website. And so I sort of grew up with random European and Australian and Brazilian snacks. But when you asked the question, an image came to my mind, which was me in probably third grade. We were in England at the time, and I had a ice cream cone that was vanilla, and it was in a cone, and I was doing a lick for me and a lick for my dog and a lick for me and a lick for my dog. And so I guess that was, I mean, if that's what, that image is what triggered when you asked that question, I guess that's one of my, I guess I might have to go get some on this lovely day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
right
And
around 20